In 1999, during the winter, I happened to be in the Czech Republic in Prague. I was shooting a mini-series about Joan of Arc, and two of my three kids came to visit with my wife, and I set a trip up to go outside of Prague to a concentration camp called Theresienstadt. My mother was in a concentration camp, so our family has this very tragic connection to the world of the Holocaust. I had been to Auschwitz, and I had been in Israel to Yad Vashem. Theresienstadt is a very unusual camp, other than most camps. It was a sort of horrific experience, but it also has one of the notorious stories of the Holocaust era, which is that the Nazis used this camp to convince the Red Cross that the Holocaust was really not occurring, and the massacre of Jews and gypsies and homosexuals was not occurring, and they fixed up the camp and created these false veneers so that these particular representatives of the Red Cross would walk through. And one of the horrors was they even had the children sing and try to convince the Red Cross that everything was wonderful. And the majority of these children were promised special treatment if they were convincing. And ultimately, throughout their stay in this camp, the majority, if not all of them, ended up being shipped off to Auschwitz. So I took my children, unsuspecting what this experience would mean to them, and we arrived at the camp and walked in, and you go through an archway with Arbeit macht frei, which is this horrific lie of the Nazis that work would set you free. And you go into the camp and you go see barracks and the squares, and ultimately it's an indescribable wave of horror that human beings can do these things to other human beings, and that this kind of evil exists in the world. And I thought the experience was summed up by a photograph of my children when they left. And the thing about this photograph is that these are children, and I think in the photograph one can see the weight that has been put on their shoulders. And my son was upset with me and said, "Dad, I don't understand. Why did we have to come here?" And I said, well, historically, this is the story of your family. But more importantly, I think, even as a young person, you need to understand this kind of evil exists. And by understanding it, even at a very early age, you then can position yourself to fight against it. And it's a tragedy of life that we endure this kind of horror. But the lesson is there for you, that you become the champion of liberty and of decency and of hope and expectation in this world as a human being, only if you understand the story. And so the opportunity to do Brundibar and in a way celebrate these voices of children, it's remarkable when one realizes what these voices are emanating from, and the horror that created this extraordinary desire to create a fairy tale and to allow children to sing it with the innocence and purity, but also with that kind of weighty adult perspective of what this really is about.